Greetings, everybody. It's Mark. I'm back on my page, Music and Mental Health. I haven't done one of these interviews in a little while, and I'm excited about my guest. Her name is Carly. Carly and I have not officially met in person, but she met me a few years ago on my Instagram page. And something about my Instagram page is that I used to post up performances that I did at this local place that used to be here in Valley Stream, New York, called Sip This, which was an amazing little coffee shop. And they used to do these open mic nights, I think about 2 times a month. And I had told these stories about how I sat in the open mics for a couple of years before I ever performed, but I perform music. I play the saxophone, I play the piano, I learned the ukulele, but I did none of those things because I was scared to actually go up in the front because of my social anxiety. So I eventually one day spoke to the owner and asked him about signing up, and I eventually went in there and performed, and then it just became a thing I did regularly. So it was very sad when they actually closed down during the beginning of the pandemic. But I was excited to meet a lot of different people through there, Carly being one of them, because I still remember our message that she sent me when she was like, I found your page, and it was like a ray of sunshine. And it was very validating because that was during a time when I was like, what's the point of this Instagram? I try to post all this positive mental health content and nobody is looking at it, and nobody's really responsive too much to it aside from friends and family that know me. But just in general, it wasn't really getting too much reception at that time. But that was one of those messages that helped me at the beginning to keep going. So I want to thank you for that. So Carly is a mental health advocate and a friend of mine, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Good morning. Really excited to be here. And I do remember when I first saw you, that's right, on Instagram. And I remember now that you say it, I do remember saying your page is like a ray of sunshine because, like you said, during that time, we were all struggling. And I feel like music was something that we could all connect on some level. And through the mental health community, we always find each other's pages and like one way or another, let alone who would know that like we're from the same area, right? And that we both have an interest in music and that we both have an interest in mental health. It was just a little little too many like similarities there to not reach out and get to know you. So I'm really happy that we did over that time in particular, and I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, that's so true. The one thing that I have found, somebody told me this, but I have found this myself too. The things that you follow, like, share, all of that kind of stuff, it affects your algorithm.
Mhm.
So if you follow a bunch of mental health pages, if you follow a bunch of pages that put up positive quotes and different things like that, you'll then start to automatically see more of that stuff on your timeline and on your feed.
Right.
Versus if you're following the Walmart fight or the people who throw hands on the bus or the people who are screaming at each other, world star, more of that stuff is going to show up on your timeline. So I think at that time when I had just started the page, I had a big mixture of everything on my page that I was seeing. But now I find a lot more pages that are related to psychology, that are related to like mindfulness, behavioral health, that kind of thing.
Right. And that makes sense because it's like just like you say in real life, what you give is what you get. Who you follow is what you get in return, right? So if you're following negativity and you're following, you know, news outlets or you're following I don't know, just angry people, just people that don't align with what your message or like especially if it's a business page or like a specific niche. Like you said, you're going to want to follow people in that realm as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a question. A lot of people have different answers to this question, but I think I found many similar answers. The discussion of mental health, nowadays we've talked about how it's pretty common. Celebrities talk about it. You see commercials about it all day. You see advertisements posted on the in the stores, or like, wherever they post paper ads still. You'll see a lot of things about mental health, better help. Sorry about that. You'll see a lot of ads about better health, and a lot of different resources
Mhm.
for people who are going through mental health struggles. But growing up in your home, was that something that was specifically addressed? Did you, even if it wasn't mental health, were you having discussions about emotional health or emotional wellness?
That's a great question. I know that many people do not have those conversations. Maybe now it's more prevalent to talk about with like your 5, 6, 7 year old, just because it's become more open. I do feel like we were given the space to share our feelings, and our parents were great in that aspect. I have a sister, a younger sister. It's just me and her, and we're 5 years apart. So I'm 25, she's 20 now, and I feel like you know we had older parents, so maybe those conversations were not as easy, but they at least were open minded and would hear us out if we were struggling. That's the one thing that always gets me is because I run a mental health like advocacy type of blog, where I share a lot about myself and my own struggles, and then I can like sort of relate to other people as well, and other people kind of confide in me, just as someone who's not a doctor, or just as like a friend, right? What I've found is they don't have the support system at home, so that's something that's really important, and even if it's not at home, they try to find it in someone else. And I feel like, as we were talking about on the Instagram live the other day, the importance of therapy, not that we were trying to sell therapy, because it's not, that's not what we were trying to do, but we were trying to talk about the benefits of that and how that can be just another outlet for someone. And if you don't go to therapy, other outlets that we discussed, just to try to meet people and try to, you know, enjoy your hobby, or try to, find something that you're interested in, could really help, just, you know, in general with your overall mental health and emotional well-being.
Oh, well, actually, that's great that you had that. I mean,
Mhm.
it doesn't specifically have to be like, hey, let's all sit down around the table and discuss our mental health,
Right.
but just having the space to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling, and I want to express myself, and have somebody listen to you and empathize and give you feedback. I would say that in my household, it wasn't quite like that. It was, first of all, there was a comparison thing going on where it was like, I understand that you had this thing going on, but my life was so much harder than yours growing up. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah. Okay.
y-
I can relate. Okay.
oh, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you put it like that, yes, because it's like, yes, they were open, right? Like, yes, they were, I guess, I hear you, but dot dot dot. Like, it was so different in my day, right?
Yeah,
So I feel
yeah.
like you're right. That is a comparison thing that I completely even just forgot about. But I also feel like that's just a natural thing to do, and I don't think any parent meant anything to insult by that. But it is interesting when you bring that up, for sure.
Yeah, I was having a conversation actually on my page with another friend of mine, and it's like we both feel like they do the best that they can do based on the experience that they had. So they didn't just drop out of nowhere and then just say, I'm just going to be this way. They grew up a certain way with their
Right.
parents, with their grandparents. And then it's like, this is what I know. So this is what I'm going to give to my children.
Right. Right. And I think that's important because it's like something funny my sister said the other day was, we were all joking around, and one thing led to another. And she was like, well, I didn't ask to be here. And my mom fired back with, well, I didn't ask to be here either. And like, it's just kind of funny how, like, none of us like asked to be here, which is, the funny thing about life is none of us asked to be here. And we're just trying to cope with it. We're just trying to find ways to cope with it and just get through the day to day. And if that's with a little bit of humor or, watching a movie that's going to make you cry, we're just trying to get through, right? And like you said, if you have somebody to talk to about your feelings, if you are feeling down, that's so important to have. So
Yeah.
definitely.
So I wanted to go back to 2020. Since, since
Yes.
you're here in New York, nearby me, I've talked to other people about this, and I know their experiences are different. But you had the New York experience,
Oh, yes.
where everything got shut down.
Hmm.
Only essential businesses were allowed to be open. We had like a 6 o'clock curfew at one point where nobody could be outside.
Yeah.
By my house, the park was actually closed down. They had like the yellow tape all around the park, and they had a large police presence enforcing that nobody could go in the park.
Oh,
The
wow.
school the schools were closed, the churches were closed, almost everything was closed. And I remember spending a large amount of time in my house being really depressed and gaining a lot of weight. And it
Mm.
was just like I wasn't interacting with too many people socially. There was the internet, but it's not the same as physically, being around other people. So, what was your experience like during that time, and how did it affect you mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so I know, like you said, the internet. Were you working from home at that time?
At the beginning, no, but when the
Mhm.
shutdown happened, my job became remote. So, yes.
Okay. So I feel like, yeah, everybody was kind of at home, unless you were like an essential worker, which, you know, they deserve an applause, because that was really a difficult time. I was just talking with my fiance yesterday about this, funny enough, and we were kind of just reflecting as we were driving. And he was an essential worker at the time. And I just remember us being so flipped out by like the germs and everything going on. And just like as a society, just not even in New York, just in general. And he was like telling me how something I didn't even know till yesterday. He was telling me how before he became a police officer, he was a plumber. Okay, so he went to college and then he did that on the side. And uh he was telling me how people wanted him to come into the house barefoot. And he
Wow.
he was telling me how like, okay, well, if I drop a boiler on my foot, you're gonna pay for that, right? Like, but my feet have germs, so it's okay. I don't want to bring any germs into the house. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like people were. It was a really scary time, and like when I heard that, I was like, wow, I didn't even know that. Like, I didn't even know you were going through that because we were all just everybody was so wrapped up in their own thing at the time. So for me, I was in school. That was my thing. I actually wasn't working because I don't know if you know, but like in August of 2019, I was in a car accident. So
Mm.
everything kind of snowballed from August 2019. And then I was seriously injured. I was actually starting a new college. So that was my first year at the school. And I had like I was post op, I was constantly in therapy. And like, I want to say February had to be after my birthday because I'm an Aquarius. I don't know about you. I'm February 12th. I think Valentine's Day, I was done with therapy. I was done with the, physical therapy and all that. And not that I couldn't drive, but I didn't have a car. So it was that bad that
Mm.
it was totaled and I had to get a new car. So I had to, work some things out. So right before the pandemic, right before March, whatever it was, March 12th, whatever it was, just got my car. So I was like,
Mhm.
this is great. I have a new car. I can drive to school. Great. And then it was like, I enjoyed that for maybe a week. And it was like, okay, we all have to stay home now. I was like, what do you mean? I was home for 8 months. Like, what do you mean I have to be
Yeah.
home? Everybody's got to be home. So that was like huge. That was a huge adjustment. And now I had to be at school at home. Everybody in my house was working from home and going to school at home. So that was huge. And then I felt for sure, I think maybe more so than my other friends, where for them it was like the sudden lack of independence. I felt like super frustrated because for so
Mhm.
long I didn't have independence, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I don't remember that story from you telling it to me, but I saw it on Andy's channel.
Mm.
Shout out to Andy from the Men Are Nuts podcast. I listened to
Yes.
that from there. So it sounded familiar, but I was like, wait, you didn't tell me that. But I heard that whole explanation that you had given.
Oh, okay, okay.
But obviously, for the purpose of this interview, a lot of people have not heard that. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I know this is going to be like a more serious part of the discussion. The main reason that I had reached out to you, or not necessarily reached out to you about coming on here, but I thought about you during this conversation we were having, was when you actually reached out to me and gave me condolences for losing my dad.
Yes,
And then you were telling me that you can relate because you have dealt with multiple pretty recent losses of your own. So I wanted to know if you would be able to share some of that and some of what you went through during that time.
absolutely. Yes, let's dive right in. I do want to say again, I know, like I said, yesterday was Father's Day. I'm very sorry for your loss. I know it was recent, and I always sympathize with people on Mother's Day and Father's Day because you never know how it's going to affect someone. It's like, especially today when everybody's so open about mental health, as we were talking about before, like you just never know how that day is going to affect people. Um, so, again, I am very sorry. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Before we start though, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what you said on my live.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Mhm.
this is a tough topic, so
Yes.
obviously this is a trigger warning for anyone who might have a hard time with this topic, have dealt with a loss that is hurting them currently. And also, this is just a conversation. It's not a therapeutic conversation. It's not something where um, this is like what you would get from your therapist. It's just two people who have dealt with losses and are going to be speaking about the mental health aspects of that. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I know it is a sensitive topic for everyone. Um, so, grief, right? It's not something that we talk about every day. It's not something that in the mental health community we really share, right? Like on our platforms, we try to, share like positive things and how we, like I said earlier, how we cope day to day, right? And try to just inspire people. But this topic is a little different. So when I reached out to you, of course, I was giving my condolences and I was just checking, and I had some genuine questions, as you remember, and you were so kind enough to answer them, and we'll get probably into that later if you want. Um, but yeah, I wasn't even doing it to like compare because I know that can be alone a trigger for some people. Like, um, not trying to compare war stories. That's not what I was trying to do at all. Like I said, I think I even said to you, like, I'm sorry if I offended you, but I just sympathized at that point. Sometimes maybe I overshared and I was like, maybe I overstepped, but it could be helpful to some people, this podcast today. So we're gonna talk about it. Um, I went through something that was like beyond painful that I would never wish onto anybody. Okay, I'll just put that out there. If you've experienced multiple losses back to back to back to back, then you might understand where I'm coming from on this. Because one loss is just painful enough, let alone multiple. So we're in 2023, right? Yes, this 2023. Sometimes I forget. So 2022 is when all of this kind of started. August 2022, we lost my great aunt. Now, you think, oh, it's like an old person, right? Like they lived a long life, whatever, but it's still life. It's still, their life still matters, and it didn't really affect me as much as it affected my mother because it was her only aunt. But of course, like when someone else isn't, upset in the house, then like, everybody else is kind of upset and you just respect their feelings and emotions and, you deal with it. I know this aunt in particular was struggling for a really long time. I don't know if you've had anybody in your family with dementia or Alzheimer's, but she was really struggling. And that's just such a debilitating disease. And we were, honestly, we were all relieved because it was just like, just go peacefully. Like it was just too
Right.
much. So like I said, we were all kind of at peace with that. And then, funny enough, here's the pattern again. I started a new school,
Mm-hmm.
right? So here I am now. Fast forward, I graduated in May, and I'm going to preface this by I started grad school in September,
Mm-hmm.
and still online actually by choice. So that's something I've been trying to navigate through all of this grief, which has been pretty interesting. Um, and we'll get back to that later. But so my uncle, my mom's brother, had cancer for a very long time. It, in and out of remission, on and off for years. I want to say maybe 6 years. And he passed away October 2nd of 2022 from that. So that was another thing that like I'd never been through that. I don't know if you have, Mark. Just losing somebody close to you, but not in a sudden way and not in a sick mental way like dementia, but just physically debilitating. I mean, to watch that was horrible. I don't know. Have you ever been through something like that?
I can't really say so with cancer or anything like that, but the Alzheimer's dementia part, my grandfather on my mom's side and also my dad had that.
Okay. So you understand. And I'm sure so many of our viewers would understand. Um, and even the cancer aspect too. Like it's a long battle. Like it really
Yeah.
is. And I never, like, yes, I've had family members, but not that close. And this was like a direct closeness. So it was a tough loss. And some people were not so considerate at the time. And I'm not gonna bash my school. not gonna do that. But they weren't really as understanding because they were kind of like, well, we're going to school online, and you know, like we're not in the classroom, so you really don't have an excuse. And yeah, it was a tough time just trying to get through all of that, just trying to get through grief,
Hmm.
and then trying to get through day-to-day life, right? So what is maybe something that you can offer as a piece of advice to somebody who's got all these responsibilities on your shoulders and you're just trying to get through day-to-day life, but you can't stop thinking about the loved one that you lost?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I am actively trying to answer that question.
Okay, okay.
Because most companies, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people, some are very fortunate and they're telling me, "Oh, my job gave me 2 weeks," or my job like was just kind of like, well, I know you were talking about school, but it depends on where you're at the time.
Right.
Basically, if you're in a situation where you're obligated to do things right now, you have things that are due right now, and the world doesn't stop for anyone, unfortunately. So I looked into my policy for my company when my dad passed, and it was like 3 days for a parent. And I
Okay.
was very upset about that because I'm like, what in the world are you supposed to do in 3 days? In fact, the 3 days was not even enough for the planning of the services, the burial, anything like that, let alone your emotional grief.
Mhm.
So I guess instead of the advice, I could just talk about what I did in that case. is that I actually had to have a conversation with my boss. And I was like, because my boss is like, how are you doing? Glad to have you back after the 3 days went by. I hope you're doing okay. Let me know if there's any way I can support you. Um, and I said, if I didn't have to be back in 3 days because of the policy, I wouldn't be back in 3 days. So I said, I'm just going to be honest with you and say that even though I'm here, you can't really expect the same of me as you could have expected from me 3 days ago because I'm not emotionally, mentally there. And then she was like, oh, well, there's the short-term disability policy. You can take PTO if you need to take paid time off. Because I found out recently some people don't know what PTO is. Paid time off. And I'm like, I don't want to use my paid time off. I don't want to go on short-term disability. I need my full paycheck to be able to cover my expenses that I'm still going to have regardless of what's going on.
Right.
So it can be tough what you just described, whether it's school or whether it's work, not feeling like you're getting the emotional support that you need. And it can be harder, actually, in my opinion, because I know everyone thinks differently. In my opinion, it can be harder when you're doing the thing remote.
Yes.
Because if
Oh,
you're
yes.
going into the office or if you're going into your school and you're seeing the people and they actually physically are looking at you, your body language, your facial expression, all of that, they're going to look at you and be like, wow, Carly is feeling really sad or she's feeling really out of it.
Right.
If if their main communication with you is like internet, instant messenger, phone, it can feel for them, even though they kind of know that you've had these losses, it still feels a little bit like business as usual. She's here, right? So because she's here, that means that she must be coping very well.
Oh, you hit it spot on. Spot on. And I mean, it was all through email. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, and even though they sent condolences,
Yeah.
it wasn't apparent, right? It wasn't apparent, but it was my only uncle. So, yeah, I mean, like I have two other uncles, but there's no relationship there. And he, for all sakes purposes, was my only uncle. So that was challenging on its own. Having to be your own advocate during that time of grief, like you said, speaking up for yourself.
Yep.
Really, really hard, really like adulting, and I joke about it because, adulting, that's speaking up for yourself when you're in pain and it's not a physical pain and that it's not something that anybody really can see. It's something that's all going on internally and it's really, really hard to do remote. Really hard in general, but really hard to do remote, especially when this school, I'm still trying to figure out my way around the system. I'm still trying to figure out policies and, like you were talking about, what's the lateness policy on assignments? What's, all these things that I never had to go through before.
Yeah.
And knowing that it was graduate school and knowing that it was more serious than perhaps a 4-year school, there's more money on the line. I have like student loans now, it was a big deal. But I digress. So that alone was a very tough time because we knew it was like a slow, painful death. I mean, we said the trigger warning. I mean, it's out there. So it was terrible to watch. And the lead up to that was trying to distract my mom, trying to make her happy, despite all the stuff that was going on.
This is your mom's brother?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it was her older brother, her only sibling. So that was hard. And her 60th birthday was 4 days before. So we really wanted to do something special for her. We ended up taking her to Manhattan. We did like a little boat cruise, something we never did before, just trying to enjoy the time that we had together as a family of four. Go out to dinner, like try to do all these things to not necessarily distract, but like to celebrate her during this time of essentially grief before it even happened, right?
I'm glad.
Because yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's another layer that not everybody really thinks about.
Hmm.
You said you lost your uncle, and your uncle is your mother's brother. So your uncle was your mother's brother. So the thing is, you have your loss that you're dealing with, but then you're also worried about your mother, and you're
Right.
also worried about the people around that are also dealing with this loss at the same time as you. So a part of you, I feel, compartmentalizes your own loss because you're like, I'm worried about mom.
Right.
I hope that she's okay. And if she sees me just like a mess and just breaking down all the time, it's going to have an impact on her, and it's going to make her grieving process more difficult. Because I know that's something that I've experienced where I'm like, there's times where I wanted to react certain ways, but I'm like, the way that I react is going to impact the people around me that are also dealing with this loss. So it's like it's very delicate.
It is. I'm glad you said that because I don't know, are you the oldest?
No, I'm
Okay.
the youngest. There's two of us.
Oh, okay. So you're the baby. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm the oldest, right?
Okay.
And I feel like because you're the oldest, you may feel more pressure to act a certain way, right? And sometimes I may not handle that the best ways because, like I said before, we were trying to manage our emotions in a certain way. Okay. By the time the funeral and the wake came around, I was unexpectedly very angry. I was very angry. I didn't think I was going to be that angry because I'm not an angry person. But I think I was just angry at the whole situation because everybody was blaming it everybody was blaming it on his exposure to 9/11 because he was a part of the cleanup crew from 9/11. Okay, so
Okay.
we're talking about us being New Yorkers. I mean, this is a true New York thing here. He was on the cleanup crew for 9/11 for 2.5 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, but then on top of whatever else he did, smoking, drinking, whatever, right? So not only was he abusing his body in other ways, but he was exposed to God knows what for 2.5 years. So it kind of all started thyroid cancer, and then it just worked its way through. So we knew it was coming, like I said, for a really long time. And it doesn't mean that some people are saying, oh, but like you knew it was coming, but it's still a death. Kind of like the elderly. Oh, well, you knew it was coming, but it's their life still mattered. And it's still a death. And something that we're going to probably get into a little bit later is sudden death, right? So, yes, we knew that this was coming, but it doesn't change the way that you feel about death. I guess if that makes sense, whether you knew that it was coming or not, it's still a shock either way. Because I think at the funeral, that's when my shock hit. That's when I was like, you know, like if you just took care of yourself, maybe it would have been here longer. Like everybody was saying, oh, 9/11 this, 9/11 that. Like, no, you like abused your body. Like you, I was mad at him. So I think that was a little bit of displaced anger. I was like, no, he did this to himself. And and I can like laugh about it now, but I was so mad at the time. And I was like, you know, babysitting his grandson. And like really like we were all pitching in whatever way that we could. And I was like, he could have been here longer if he didn't do this to himself. And it was like, you go through those things, you go through those feelings, as you know.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar. I know there's a couple of different charts or whatever, but the one that I've been looking at the most is the 5 stages of grief,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
anger is number two on that list. So,
Mhm.
and not just myself personally, but like within my family, there was different arguments about different things, and just a lot behind the funeral planning, and then you just realize it's a stage and it's a phase
Right.
that a lot of people, if not everybody, goes through, because it's like this book has closed.
Mhm.
So you can't, I mean, you can be angry at the person all you want, but they're not
Right.
here. but then the people around you are here. So it's almost like you go finding things that you otherwise might not have found to be mad at each other for. And you start realizing it and you're like, man, we got to just pull it together because we're
Mm.
all struggling here. And the way that we're displaying it is not healthy because we have a long process ahead of us. And we all need to stick together for that.
I love that. I love that you brought up the 5 stages. Now, I know the emotions, but do you know the order of them by any chance? Because I've forgotten. It's been a long time.
I have the list in front of me
Do
because
you?
because I
Yes.
actually just did like a presentation about it last week. So I was like,
Okay.
it would be relevant to this discussion. So if it presents itself, I will mention it.
Let's hear
So
it.
the stages are denial,
Mm,
anger,
okay.
bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
know that for myself, I went through a denial phase because at first, when I just saw the stages,
Mhm.
I was like, I know that he's gone. I'm not denying that.
Right.
The denying part for me was kind of like a disbelief and a numbness that
Mm,
came along with that time. Where if you ask me how I'm feeling at that time, it's just like a emotional flat line. I don't feel up, I don't feel down. I feel a little sad, but I
okay.
can't really identify the emotion. I'm like, let me just keep going with everything that I'm doing. I was still doing races, I was
Mm,
still working, I was still doing whatever I was doing before, like in a robotic type of way. So
mm,
then when I read more about denial, I'm like, it can present itself in different ways.
mm.
For some, it might literally be like, oh no, they're still here. I don't really believe that they're gone. But for
Right.
others, you can know that they're gone, but it's just like your mind has kind of shut itself down to a degree because it's not ready to deal with the pain yet.
Right. And it's that keep pushing through the daily routine. I'm just going to push through because you're essentially avoiding it. Right?
Yes.
Like you're avoiding trying to be sad. You're avoiding trying to recognize that they're not here anymore. So I'm just gonna go for my run. I'm just gonna go for my walk. I'm just gonna go to work.
Yep.
You know, some people work actually helps, right? Like I was struggling in school. I couldn't bring myself to sit at the computer and like read or do anything, but I could go to work and that was okay for me. Like so I'm a substitute teacher. That was
Okay.
fine for me because sometimes kids are a great distraction, right? So that for me worked out in my favor. But for me to be like personally responsible for myself and to sit down and do my work, I couldn't bring myself to do it. But yet in that time, looking back, I was such in a mode of taking care of everybody else.
Yes.
Going to work and taking care of elementary school kids was the same thing. So for me, that was the same thing, but with total strangers. You need me to tie your shoe? Okay. You need to go to the bathroom? Great. You know, who's lining up for lunch? Who's whatever, the daily routine. And that was fine for me. And then it would hit me when I would come home and I would just pass out. Like I would just go to sleep at 5 o'clock because I couldn't cope with that exhausted me. And then I was like, all right, I did my taking care of people duties for the day and I have to go to bed. I just shut down. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
it's different for different people. And the one thing about the stages I've said before were just kind of made for you to be able to identify the place that you're in.
right.
The stages do not necessarily go in a linear fashion, and you can jump from one thing to the other, and they don't have to go in order. Like I actually remember as you're talking about your uncle, I had one uncle on my mom's side. She had one brother, two sisters and one brother. He passed in, I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And they live in Canada. Um, the rest of my family, aside from my mom. So I remember I got a contact on Facebook from my uncle's landlord, saying that he had passed a couple of days before.
Okay.
And my grandmother and my aunt, who live in the same town as he lived, were out of town. So the first thought in my mind, they were coming home that day when I got that contact. So I was like, I don't want them to find out this information on a voicemail because I know they were left a whole bunch of voicemails from him, from the police or whatever. So my mind was not even really in a grieving mode.
Right.
It was like inform the family, figure out how they're going to get informed, and then help with I had to fly over there and help clean out his apartment. It was just a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I literally did not feel much. I didn't feel like sadness, anger. Everyone feels a little bit sad, but in a true sense of like, I'm so sad. I've really processed this loss type of thing. And I thought I was weird for that because I'm like, everyone around me is crying and just going through it. And I'm just calm and nothing's really going on with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's another horrible way to find out is just through a contact over the phone, and you never expect that phone call, but you were like in that mode of protecting. And how
Yeah.
are they gonna, find out and all that? And that's completely normal. I mean, and I commend you because you were trying to keep it all together, you know, while they were
Yeah.
going through that.
Subconsciously. Yeah.
Right.
Subconsciously, like it went into that protective mode, as you were saying. And
Right.
then when the actual day came, that's when it all came out. It's like
Yeah.
unexpectedly. I was like, wow, I got through this really well. I didn't even cry. I didn't have any kind of big breakdown or anything like that. And
Mm.
then once the day comes and I saw him and everything, and I was around friends and family, that's when it came out.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like the timelines can go very differently for each person and for each loss. Because even though you're telling me it's not the same as losing a parent, that's true.
Right.
But I've had different kind of losses that hit me different kind of ways. When I was 18 or 19, I had three friends from high school that were, I guess they were just kind of going on a joyride and their car hit a tree. And so when you asked if I dealt with multiple losses, they all died in that same accident.
Oh,
And
it's
I
terrible.
remember, yeah, they had a memorial service at the school, and then they had three separate because their families all had separate services, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Some of my friends didn't attend all three. I attended all three, like back to back, and it was mind numbing.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought at that time that's the worst thing that I'm ever going to experience, and it was terrible. But
Mhm.
each subsequent loss that I've experienced after then has been a different process. Sometimes it even depends on your relationship with the person. You
Yes.
could lose like a sibling that impacts you less than a friend, depending upon the type of relationship you had with that sibling and the type of relationship you had with that friend. My whole point of saying all that is grief is such a multi-layered, multifaceted thing that can't really be labeled in one way.
Yes. Yeah. I'm very sorry for your loss of your three friends. Going back to multiple losses there back to back. I mean, that's tragic. That is tragic. But like you said, grief comes in many layers. And I'm glad that you brought up that you can skip around in the stages because
Yeah.
it hits everybody in different ways. And especially going back to the relationship of how you knew that person. Yeah. I mean, it can hit you in different ways. So, the holidays are a sensitive time for people who've lost loved ones. Usually that first year is really intense. Um, but, and we just had Father's Day, so but so now into my multiple loss story when I was telling you over Instagram.
Mhm.
The timeline, I kind of developed like a trauma timeline because I never went through multiple losses like that. Not all in one shot, like, oh, family died in a car accident, God forbid. Not all in at the same setting. But
Yeah.
it was like an emotional roller coaster because you're trying to keep things together for everybody else. But then you're also trying to keep things together for yourself. And I had a massive waves of highs and lows these past, I don't know, I want to say 6 months. So, like I said, it started with my great aunt, then my uncle. Then, in the midst of all of that, in the midst of trying to not get kicked out of school and trying to manage all that, my fiance, who I've known since we're 15, now fiance, decides to propose. So, there's a monkey wrench. Okay, it was wonderful, but it was such bad timing. And I think he knew he was trying to make me happy, but it was, I know he's probably going to watch this, and he knows it was bad timing. I love him and we're all excited and whatever, but it was not the best timing, but still made it wonderful. We went away and it was really nice. Then a week later, my uncle's son proposes to his girlfriend. So now it's not even a month since he's gone. And
Mhm.
it's not even a month since he's gone. I'm engaged. Now his son is engaged. We didn't even get to Thanksgiving yet.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
was just like, oh my God, like he's missing all these things. And then his daughter announces at Thanksgiving that she's pregnant, which we figured out
Wow.
why. We figured out why because she wasn't drinking at the funeral.
Wow.
So she wasn't drinking, and we were like, "Do you need it?" And she was like, "No, like I'm good." Now we knew why. So it was just a lot. Like it was a lot. It was a lot. It, happiness, sadness, mixed. He's not here. He's missing all these things. It was an interesting time. Somehow we made it through Christmas. We got through. By January, I was finally at the point, and I think everybody in my house was at this point. Holidays were over. We were at that point where now I was like trying to wedding plan, trying to get on a better foot with school, right? Trying to start afresh, new semester. Okay. I get the phone call that my mom's cousin, who I've become very close with over the last few years. He was 51. Um, was at a family wedding in Mexico. They all went down. We decided not to go. Or actually, no, my bad. We weren't even invited. It was just immediate family. But I knew about the wedding, and I saw him less than a week before because I babysit their son all the time. We're still very close. I watch him all the time. Um, he passed away in Mexico, died of a heart attack.
Wow.
So healthy, like does marathons like you. I mean, like swims every day in his pool. Like we were just, I never went through
Shocking.
a shock like
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
so I knew something was wrong. Um, and it's funny because you know, in TV and in movies, it's kind of over exaggerated. But have you ever seen when uh, a character who's dying has like an epiphany?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. So not to get into depth, but I believe that he knew he was going to go. I believe he knew something was going to happen because of my last conversation with him the week before.
Mhm.
So it was intense, and I didn't think about it until later because who would think about these things? Um, but I'll never forget that conversation, and I got very close with him. So that was a kick in the gut because yes, he was in his 50s, but he has a 7-year-old son. So really, really hard to swallow. Nobody was expecting it. And, I had to be the one to tell everybody.
Mhm.
So, kind of in your shoes, I was the person to tell everyone, and it was horrible. Horrible because nobody was expecting it, right? We just got out of two deaths that we were expecting, and we were like, just go already. Like, just
Yeah.
be at peace, go. So this was nothing like we've ever experienced or I've personally ever experienced. That was challenging. And then to make things more chaotic. And this is again the part where something I wouldn't wish on anybody. Somehow we get through the wake and the funeral, somehow, and I'm like a zombie. At this point, I'm just like a zombie because I was doing so well mentally, and now I'm like back to ground zero. Like I'm down, down, and down. A week to the day after my cousin's funeral, who died of a heart attack, I get a phone call from my childhood friend saying that our classmate, who was healthy and active and whatever, fit, drops dead of a heart attack. So,
wow.
yeah. And
Man.
I found out at work, and I was debating leaving early, but I had to like excuse myself, and I lost it because I was already in such a bad state that I couldn't even believe it. I couldn't even believe it because I just went through this, and I was like, no, like out of all people, like that's when the shock and the denial comes in. And I was just like, but you're my age. You're not in your 50s. You're my age. You're my friend. Like that was my childhood friend.
Yeah.
And that was horrible. So now you have all these young people at the funeral. And it was just like, I think he was 20. If I'm 25 now, that was before my birthday. I was 24 years old. So back to back to back funerals and everything. And then the way my life afterwards panned out was okay, really, really heartbreaking time. Have to get through basically my friend's wake and funeral. Fast forward, Super Bowl Sunday is on my birthday. That's how it fell this year. And they were like, oh, what do you want to do for your birthday? I'm like, I just want to be home. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate because, sometimes if you grieve, you're just not in the mood to get out.
Yeah.
You're not in the mood. So I was like, everybody come to me. It's Super Bowl Sunday anyways. Let's just make the most of it. Come over. Valentine's Day was great. First engaged Valentine's Day. Awesome. Week after that is my cousin's wedding. So it just constantly felt like we were going. And it was nice to go to the wedding, get out of New York, see different people, right? And then a couple days later was my engagement shoot. So you're in this like moment of disbelief where you're like, all these exciting things are happening, but all of these people are gone, right? So I was in that point of just like you said earlier, going, just trying to get through, pushing through, next thing. By March, I collapsed. I completely collapsed. I basically fell into a depression. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I didn't want to be around anybody. I needed my space. People were asking me about wedding planning. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing for breakfast. Like,
Yeah.
So multiple losses like that, old, young, sudden, not sudden. Like, I don't wish that on anybody. And I feel like I'm finally now, when I reached out to you, finally now at the point where I'm like, okay, now it's June, right? These people all passed away in the winter and the fall and whatever. Now it's June and I'm finally starting to feel like myself. So I remember giving you that piece of advice when I was like, take your time because there is no timeline for grief. So it's important to take your time.
I'm sorry for that huge roller coaster that you went through during that time. That sounds like a lot to have dealt with.
Thank you for
um,
letting me share.
as you were talking, I was actually looking at I'm gonna show you really quick. Hold
sure.
on. I don't know how well I'm gonna be able to show this here, but I created a whole chart. Let me see.
Okay.
And I was like going through everything you were saying and kind of seeing parts of it for everything, like the denial, the anger.
The first thing I saw was take care of yourself. That was the first thing.
Oh, on this side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to do things where I present solutions in addition to the problems, but these were just a combination of some things that I read and some things that have been useful for myself.
Those are all great. Yeah, great.
I know my timeline is a lot shorter
Mm.
right now than yours, because we're talking, my dad passed a little more than 2 months ago.
Right.
But the thing is, when there was things to do, when I was working, when I was funeral planning, when all these family were coming in, when all these people were coming to visit the house, even though I felt sad in the background, I can relate to what you're saying, is what I'm trying to say. Even though I felt sad in the background, there was always something happening.
Right.
I'm going here, I'm doing this, I have to figure out how to print out these flyers, I have to pick people up from the airport. I'm talking to these people that are here visiting with us, figuring this out, I'm figuring that out. I'm on the phone all the time. It didn't start hitting me until all of that was done.
Mm.
Once everything was done, the service was done, people went back home, nobody was around like that anymore. My phone was not ringing off the hook anymore. And it was just me and my thoughts. That's when I was like, man, this hurts. And
Mm.
actually, I had this excess. I still kind of have it, it's just a little bit less now. I had this excess anxiety
Mm.
because I was able to put all that anxiety towards tasks. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. When all the tasks were not there anymore, I'm sitting in bed in the morning like, okay, but what do I got to get up for?
Right.
I don't specifically have anything that I need to do. And now I'm sitting with all these feelings and I don't know what to do with them.
Mm.
So I would say I'm at an early stage. Despite 2 months going by, I'm at a very early stage in this whole process where I'm now like, I need a therapist. I need someone to talk to. I need to find new purpose in life. I have to find ways to. I appreciate you talking about you getting engaged during that time and going to weddings and having a family member that got pregnant and like happy occasions where you're in your own head,
Mm.
where parts of you are like, this is all happy, but also this person is not here or these people are not here during these times, so there's like this undertone of sadness with all those things as well. So I think it's I guess you're thinking about this more in retrospect. I'm guessing that it wasn't that active in your mind. This is you like reflecting back on it and realizing that's what was going on. But during the time, I'm sure that you're just like, okay, I'm a little bit sad, but let me keep going.
Right. Yeah.
Would you
No,
say
you
that's
shared some
it?
great points. I feel like it was still all so fresh. Like I feel
Yeah.
like because those three happy things, right, at that point last fall, me getting engaged. I mean, he passed on October 22nd. I was engaged on the 29th.
Wow.
So, I mean, like I think
Wow.
my fiance kind of knew it was our time. He had the ring picked out before he passed away. Apparently, he told him before,
Mm,
which I found out later. So I was like, whew. I was like, okay. Made me feel a little bit better, but still, he's not here, And then, like, his son, a week after I got engaged, proposed to his girlfriend, and that, like, it was all, since it was all so close together, all I could think about was he's not here. But, you know, same thing. I mean, with my mom's cousin passing away so suddenly, you don't think that's going to happen. First of all, you're in a foreign country. You're there for a special occasion. I mean, they went down for a wedding. He didn't make it to the wedding. So, I'm so glad I was not in Mexico. And because just hearing it from up in New York, trying to
yeah.
communicate with everybody, that alone, I mean, we were here crying for days and we were just
Yeah.
like, just get home already. Like we just wanted them to get home because it was just not knowing what was going on. You're in a foreign country. Now they have the body. Like it was too much to like process. Like now you're not even 5 minutes away from us. You're in another country. It just the whole thing with not being physically here was tough. And then, like you said, like they went down for a special occasion. How they went through with the wedding, I don't even know. But the whole thing, I think they were going through what we were going through up here. Like, okay, well, just got to get things done. That maybe was their way of grieving. Well, he would have wanted us to go through with the wedding. Like, let's just, keep going, keep going, keep going. And, maybe that's how they handled things down there. I sure as heck wouldn't have been able to do that, but they were really strong. I still commend them for that. But maybe that was part of their grieving process. And to kind of make it come full circle, everybody has their own grieving process. And, people deal with things in different ways. Maybe that was theirs. Maybe that was theirs. So, yeah, I definitely keeping on a timeline. There is no timeline. There is no timeline. So I just feel like take your time, because dissecting one loss is hard enough. But then for me to dissect, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 or 5 people. I mean, in a matter of 6 months, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And then, when you were talking about doing things, and in March, I said I like collapsed. That was like my social barometer being like, like down at a 0. But getting engaged, somehow that's what got me through, because I was like, okay, now Lauren's wedding, that was my cousin who we went to the wedding in February. Her wedding's over. We're back home. Okay, I can focus on school, and maybe we could start looking at some wedding venues. Maybe I could start planning for me, right? Distraction. So then that's when we started wedding planning, just me and my fiance. And now that it's June, so now we kind of have some things taken care of. And then I realized, like in May, I called up my friend hysterical crying, and I was like, everything's done. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, the deposits are done. Like, everything's done. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I was like actually panicking because there was nothing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that completely.
And I never felt like that.
And I also get you, like, distraction is not always a bad thing. So I like what you said very early on when I was telling you about my type of early distraction, where you said avoidance.
Right.
Distraction doesn't have to be avoidance. It can be avoidance, but it doesn't have to be. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So distraction in a sense of something big and shocking like that happens, or even if it's not shocking, loss is loss, even if it was a long drawn out dementia, Alzheimer's process, or a car accident, or somebody who's healthy and fit one day and they're gone the next day. Each one of those is still something that impacts you in a big way. So the kind of distraction that's avoidance is like you're not even thinking about it. You're just like, oh, life goes on, business as usual. I got to do this. I have to accomplish this. I have to go here, here, here. That kind of thing is avoidance. Now, I had another experience where, I was just like, I was thinking about it a little bit. And then I was like, I just need to regroup and regather. So I'm just going to stay away from people and not answer the phone and just like be by myself to process. And sometimes you need that, but if you do that for like an extended amount of time, you're like, I'm not going to be around people. I'm not going to talk to anybody. And I'm just going to kind of just deal with this on my own. It can be something that leads you into a phase of depression. Because it has to come out somehow. And I saw myself getting to that kind of spot, because I'm like, once all these people leave me alone, and once I stop having to do all this stuff socially and be around all these people. You didn't see the video of my funeral, my dad's funeral, or anything like that, but it was a pretty big funeral and it required a lot of me. I have social anxiety, as I said, and it was like so many people there, and I had to greet everybody, talk to all these people. I had to get up and speak at the service, and it was a lot for me, because for me, when I do things like that, then I have periods of time where I'm like, I just need to be alone to kind of regather that social energy to be able to get back out. So I had that period of time, but then I was like, I'm doing nothing, including self care. I'm not exercising, I'm not eating well, I'm not talking to anybody, I'm not going outside to get some air, I'm not doing anything productive, I'm not working on my goals, etc. So I was like, I could do this and end up in this huge rut
Sure.
that becomes very difficult to get out of. So I need healthy distractions,
Mhm.
which meant I need to work on positive goals. I need to reach out to people that are able to help get me out of where I am right now, which is not everybody, but the good ones that I know can help me, with what I'm trying to work on. Getting back into things like, my good hobbies that I like. Um, Planning a wedding,
Mm.
that can be a positive distraction.
Yeah.
As long as you're not using it as something that is to avoid you thinking about the person that you lost or people that you've lost.
Right. Or in my case, avoiding schoolwork. Right? Like I'm like, "Oh, I'll just do this and like I'll do the homework later." Right? And I'll like procrast. But you're right. And I'm sure that required a lot of like what I was saying earlier, like your social battery, right?
Yeah,
Like
social
just all
battery, I
those
like that.
things. I'm sure. And something else I brought up when I was talking with you, earlier before we did this podcast, was during that time, you're going to have good apples and you're going to have bad apples. And I don't know, these girls that I was hanging out with were mutual friends of my fiance, like their girlfriends kind of thing. And so, like, it was kind of like, oh, our guys are dating, so like we should connect more type of thing. And we started getting friendly like last summer or so, but they didn't know me well enough to be like best friends talking every day and that kind of thing. I ended up losing them as friends during this grieving process. It's not what I wanted. I would have loved to have continued staying in touch with them. I would have loved to have continued the friendships or even grow the friendships because they weren't really that strong, anyways. I'll be honest. They, like I said, were kind of just mutual friends. But because of that, they didn't understand how much pain I was in. So, you know, on top of all of this, we're mental health pages, right? You and I. And you said I have social anxiety. I have been suffering with basically anxiety and ADHD since forever, but never got a diagnosis. So, um, talk about being our own advocates earlier. I was trying to, during all of this messy stuff, starting a new school and everything, and everybody basically dying in front of me, I was trying to get diagnosed. So that alone comes with a lot of stuff. Like that alone comes with, like you were saying, a lot of emotions and a lot of um, things just trying to sort out yourself, let alone take care of everybody else around you, right? So, uh, grief, I'm glad we are talking about friends because grieving somebody that's alive is a thing. It is a thing. You're grieving the loss of a friendship that didn't work. You're grieving the loss of a job that you didn't get. You're grieving the loss of an opportunity that you could have had, but things didn't work out. And it's okay to be sad about those things. It's okay to go through the grieving process. I mean, it's a thing. It's real. Those are real feelings. Um, and I had a hard time losing them, but at the same time, they weren't understanding. They, like you said, positive distractions, right? They kind of were the friends that were like, come out to dinner with us, uh, come out to the bars, come do that, and I wasn't in that headspace and they weren't understanding. And it was at the point where it got so bad that they were trying to put it all on me. And I kind of said, like, look, I went to my friend's funeral this morning. Like, like point blank, I went to my friend's funeral this morning. I'm not going out to Queens to go have Asian food with you tonight. Like, that's not happening. Like, and if you can't understand that, then I don't know what's wrong with you. Then it was like, it got bad. It got really bad, and it didn't have to get like that. But, like, it happened, you know, and that was a loss that I had to basically grieve. You know, and that could be, some people say, oh, a little over dramatic, but it's really not. When you look at that timeline of grief and those emotions, it's grief. So, you know, like you said, you find your positive people along the way that support you, and you find what makes you feel good, right? To me at that time, going to the bars and going out and trying these new things, it wasn't for me at that time, because at that same time, it was like, I think actually that day, I got the phone call telling me about my test results saying that I had ADHD. So, so in that and all of that, right, I was trying to take care of myself in some way. And I remember actually taking the test, actually going to Manhattan with my mom, taking the test, and praying that I got out of that evaluation on time so that I can go to my friend's wake that night. So it was like, really, my friend said I should do a TED Talk. Like, my friend said I should actually, like, because the amount of stuff that snowballed in my life for 6 months, it was like unheard of. And my therapist was like, are things usually like this for you? And I said, no, this is like something that's unheard of. Like, my life isn't like this at all. And she was like, okay, like, that's interesting. So, you know, I rolled with the punches. But I mean, it was like that. It was no exaggeration. It was like I was getting tested for ADHD and anxiety and whatever else under the sun, after years of trying to advocate for myself. To then go to the wake that night. I barely made it in traffic and all on a Friday night. Then went to the funeral the next morning, and then I'm arguing with these girls over text on why I can't go to dinner. And then, oh, they confirmed I have something wrong with me. So, like, you know, like, you just say, you know, and like, we're in the Instagram live, and then I promise I'll shut up. The Instagram live that we were talking about a couple weeks ago about therapy and stuff. We were talking about emotional maturity or immaturity, right? That, my friend, is emotional immaturity. That they were not on my level and they couldn't understand my pain. But then I knew the people who were in my corner and understood my pain and just gave me space. Like, you know, and now I'm more public about my ADHD, but I think you were also saying how you felt a little bit of shame with your diagnosis. And it was like
a lot of shame, yes.
A lot. And like, I knew that I was struggling all these years, but I kind of brushed it off because I was undiagnosed. And now I was like, oh God, I have a label. Oh God, I'm like in this community now. I don't know if I want to be a part of this community. Let me do my research. Let me, like, crap. You know? So now I'm like, of course, I'm questioning all of my past relationships and all of my decisions and everything that goes with ADHD. And I'm like, maybe that's why I lost friends, and maybe that's why I lost interest in things. And, you know, so you just spiral. But yeah, all of that was going on during grief. And like you said, if you take something like running, like you're running, I know you have a marathon today, lots of luck. I just, you know, you got to do things that make you feel good. So it's like, okay, if the homework doesn't get done, but you're watching a movie and you feel good for the first time in 3 weeks, like, my fiance was still like, just enjoy the movie. Just do what makes you feel good. Hang out with people that make you feel good and go from there, you know?
There's thank you for that. There's just so many different things I was thinking about while you were talking. Number one, I appreciate you saying that the grieving process is not only for somebody who is gone, who is physically gone. There's, like you said, a loss of a job, a friend that is no longer your friend. I was thinking about, as you were talking about that, the friends part specifically, and I was looking at my same list: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. You could go through that exact same thing
Mm,
for losing a friend,
yeah.
right? So this is a tough one, and this is I'm glad you mentioned it because it's something I did want to mention in this conversation.
Mm. Oh, good.
Yeah, my friendships have changed and morphed during this time, or been lost,
Mm,
one or the other, one or the other or the other. Some of them were like friends that I kind of considered casual friends, or like friends that I talk to here and there, but we could go 3 months, 4 months without speaking, and it's not that big of a deal to me as long as I get an occasional message like, hey, I'm doing good, or how's it going. I'm good with that. We don't have to talk on any kind of regular basis. I've had some of those people who just started calling me on a like daily, or at least once a week, or a couple times a week. Like, I understand what you're going through.
mm,
What can I do for you? I want to help you. If you need to vent, people I didn't expect to be in that role. I had people like the ones you described who they probably genuinely wanted to help. I assume they wanted to help me by saying, hey, it's good to get out. You need to get out and do this, and you just need to go do things to make you happy and forget about it. There's a time and a place for that, right?
right.
There's a time and a place for you to do that. But the best thing in my mind is for them to be like, what space are you in?
Mm,
What do you need from me? Because it could be different things at different times. Like those same things that they were asking you to do could have provided useful once you are in the space to do that.
right.
But if somebody is trying to force you to be in that space and say, this is what you need without asking, that's where it creates some kind of contention. I've experienced that too. And then there's a third aspect I've had where it's like people that I expected to hear from didn't hear from them at all. Haven't
Mm,
heard from them to this day. And that's something that put me through a grief in and of itself. Like this person that has been here for years, we talk all the time, I know them well. I would never expect that when I'm going through some kind of tragedy or some kind of crisis that they wouldn't be the first one on my phone or stopping over at the house, reaching out to me, seeing what's going on. I was presented different reasons for that as I was, going through, I guess, the therapy process.
right.
And it's like some people just don't know what to do. Some people are like, this is just such a big, hard, emotional thing for me. Actually, I recently had a conversation with one such friend who, I hope they don't mind me saying this, but it's just relevant to the discussion. We talked it out already and we're on good terms now. They weren't there during that really hard part.
Mm,
And when we finally like reconnected and had a conversation about it, they told me that it was because they didn't know what to do or say.
mm,
It was like I felt bad that I didn't reach out
mm,
first day, second day, third day, and then time started building up. Then I felt guilt that I had not reached out. And then I thought about, if I reach out at this point, you're probably just going to be furious and cuss me out type of thing.
yeah.
So I felt like I passed the point of where I was supposed to reach out, and now I don't know what to do. I wish I could say something, but I feel like it's not my place anymore because I don't have a right to do that. So that was such a productive conversation for me
Mm,
because I like to think about multiple sides.
mm,
So it could be that they're not in the same place emotionally as you. Some people, they only think within the scope of themselves. There is that section of people. They're not thinking like, oh, this person has a wake or a funeral to go to, so maybe this is not the best time to invite them to go to the bar. You know, but other people are like, should I invite them to the bar?
Mm.
Should I offer to talk to them? You know, should I get them a book? Like I maybe they just haven't really been through that type of loss or that type of specific thing that you've been through. So they're
Mm.
like, I literally don't know. I want to help, but I don't know. So they become kind of paralyzed by that. And it's like maybe they need space and I'll wait it out until that person feels better. Not knowing you might need space, but not necessarily that kind of space.
Yes.
Like, not the type of space that's like, I'm not going to talk to you at all, because
Hmm.
then you feel like their presence is not even there.
Right.
You know, I told that same person I'm talking about with the space thing, I was like, you could have given me space with a check in here and there.
Hmm.
I'm just checking in with you to see how you're doing. You didn't need to fix anything. You didn't have to solve anything for me. Just knowing that you're there and you care and you're willing to do whatever I need to help me, that would have been a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head because some people just don't know how to help. Um, and I think it all stems from like lack of emotional maturity. Maybe they haven't even not even so maturity, but maybe just that they haven't been in your shoes before, so they don't know what to do, and that's genuinely okay. Um, but if it's coming across as like neglect, then you're then
Yes,
there's issues, so
yes.
I'm glad that you and your friend were able to work things out because that's important. um like I said, I kind of wish I was able to work that out with those other two girls. Sometimes
It's
you
not
just
a
can't. You can't.
it's not everybody. It's just that
Yeah.
one person. It's just that there's
Yeah.
more that I didn't work it out with than the ones that I did. But I was just thinking, I'm glad that I have at least one.
Right.
And when they came back, or actually, I should even say they came back. I circled back to them
Mm.
because it was something that was just bothering me so much because we never actually even had a conversation about it.
Mm.
Um, I was like, for us to be friends now, I need to be able to tell you exactly like how I felt about this, and I need to hear the reasons why your actions were what they were
Mm.
before I can like move forward and start over, so to speak. So
That's smart. Yeah.
being able to hear that was very therapeutic for me because there's a feeling of abandonment that comes with that
Yeah.
when you're like, man, these people that I really love, these are my people, this is my tribe. And you're like, I just automatically assume your tribe is going to be there for you when you're dealing with a crisis. And then when they're not there, you're like, now I'm dealing with multiple losses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with the whatever the loss of whatever it was that I'm going through, the issue itself. Like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a death. It could be any kind of loss.
Mm-hmm.
When they're not surrounding you and holding you up,
Right.
then you're like, I'm I'm losing multiple things at the same time, and I don't know what to do.
Right.
So, but I think it teaches you to like really pay attention to those around you, the people that you allow into your circle. And you have to choose those people very carefully. And I always say this phrase, you never learn anything in lukewarm temperatures.
Ooh. Yeah.
So we can all sit in the lukewarm temperature all day.
Mm.
We're together, we're talking all the time, we're around each other all the time, but nothing major is really happening. So
Huh.
you're not really going to learn anything. But then when the temperature gets hot or the temperature gets really cold, then you're going to see what the people around you are doing.
Huh. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That is, you brought up so many great points, but that I think I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna use that in my back pocket for sure.
And I'm
Yeah,
gonna flip this to a positive too. It's not a bad thing.
right.
It's a hard thing, yes, to deal with people that you expected to be one way and turned out to be another way during these times.
Mm.
But it's an important one because, in my opinion, you are going to learn that lesson at some point in time eventually. Whenever somebody turned that dial on the tap, you were going to learn whatever was going to happen because it was going to happen for some time period, and some situation. So knowing right now makes you examine the people that you have in your life. It makes you learn things about ones that you didn't know would be there for you in ways that they were. It makes you see that certain people that you thought were like riding for you would jump out of the car when it runs out of gas,
Mm.
and it just makes you more in tune with yourself, with your needs, with expressing your needs to people. And you have to develop a certain level of strength to be able to say, if I express my needs to these people and they're not listening and they're not willing to assist me with these needs, and the needs are reasonable, you've thought about them and you're like, I'm not asking them to do anything extra, I'm just saying this is what I need for myself, and they're like not willing to accommodate that, you have to be willing for those people to walk away.
Yeah.
And there will be people that come, or people that are already there, or a combination of both, that are willing to meet those needs and not make you feel like you're being demanding or you're being unreasonable. It's like, this is just Mark, or this is just Carly, and this is just their boundaries and what they feel they need to be a whole person.
I love that. I love that. You hit on so many great points that I just, you know, this is the thing why I love the mental health community and like hooking up with other accounts and meeting other people through these kinds of platforms, whether it's a blog or social media, because, here we are, right? Funny enough that we're both like in New York and we live in like, probably not even an hour away from each other. I'm not even quite sure. But it's
Not
just the
even
fact
close to
that,
an hour.
yeah, probably. I mean, right? And you were originally from Canada, but what are the odds you're like here and here we are. I just think it's great because there's so many differences, right? Look at us on the camera. There's so many differences. Male, female, skin color, ethnicity, where we come from, how old we are. I don't know. There's probably like an 8 or 9 year age gap, right? But look at how many similarities that we have. Look at how many, as people, like, these are why I love these conversations because at the end of the day, we're just people and we all go through the same things. And maybe my process of healing is different than your process or the guy across the street. But at the end of the day, like, we're all people. And I just feel like having these platforms are so important to like just connect as people and not as doctors, not as therapists, because like that's how we met and here we are. I think it's so great. That's how me and Andy met, right? That's how you and Andy met and we did those podcasts, and it's such a great resource to have, to know that you're not alone. And like, I'm figuring out all those things through friendships. A lot of those points that you were saying kind of now, like in my early adult life, and I think we were talking about on Instagram live the other day, like 24 for me was great. 25 is just kind of going downhill, but I'm slowly getting back up there. Like I said, June is here. We're almost in July, and I'm like starting to finally feel like clear-headed and more like myself now that I've sort of moved out of the stages of grief. They're never going to fully go away, you know, but at some point you have to move on, and I feel like that's kind of where I'm at, mentally, and that's also why I was able to do this podcast with you today, where I was like, you know what? This is a good time for me, and I feel like I can openly express not only what I've been through in the last couple of months, but how I've dealt with it. Um, and how maybe other people watching this can relate, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? It's just to give people some hope. So I feel like, yeah, finding your friendships along this journey too is crucial, because family is hurting. If you're losing somebody, they're hurting just as much as you. And sometimes you just need an outlet that's outside. And yeah, finding your good and bad apples, like I said, along the way. Who's going to support you? Who's going to give you what you need? And advocating for yourself along the way.
I think that's an excellent way to sum it up. I wanted to say one more thing about Sip This, as a matter of fact.
Oh, I
As
miss Sip This. I miss
I
it.
I was dealing with loss, not having Sip This anymore, because that was such a
Yeah.
regular daily part of my routine. I worked right down the street from there. I would go in there every day to sit down and have some coffee, and I would go to the open mic nights twice a month. But what I was gonna say about Sip This is it reminds me of what you just said about this like weird, uh, I mean weird for lack of a better term, cultural melting pot that was in there.
Yeah.
So I recall when I used to go in there, my anxiety was so bad. My performance anxiety when it came to playing my instruments was so bad that once, even though I had the courage now to get up there and play, I would literally just get up there. I'm gonna play this song and this song, and then I just put on the background track, play the music, and then get off, and then zip on out of there. And Joe, who was the owner of the place, Joe was like, "Why do you never stay, man? Like, what's going on?" It's like, you can sit down. I always wanted him to put me first on the list so I
Yeah.
could play very early before everyone gets there, and then like leave before I have to talk to anybody. So I remember when I was talking to my therapist at the time, I told her that I want to do like mental health motivational speaking. So she knew about Sip This because I would talk about it all the time. I even showed her some videos. And she was like, why don't you throw a little bit of those messages in there? She said, do you have like a time limit when you go up there? I'm like, actually, he lets me go up there like 15, 20 minutes at a time sometimes, unless it's a really busy day. He actually told me this. He was like, and if anyone happens to see this from Sip This, don't get mad. But he was like, some people are better than others. And he said, I give everyone a chance to perform. But when I know somebody is like a pretty good performer, I tend to give them more time. And he was like, you're one of the good ones. So
Aw.
there's not really a big time limit that I'm putting on you. Whatever you want to do, you can go up there and do it. So I was like, okay. So I remember I stood up there one time and I was like, hey, I usually just get up here and play, but I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about my story. I spoke about how I sat in the back for 2 years and I didn't perform. I even brought my saxophone in there one time, and people were like, oh, what's that? And just them asking kind of scared me off, and I took it back and left.
Yeah.
I told them about that. And then I was like, I'm a mental health counselor. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder, depression, and they're all gasping, I think, for two reasons. One, because of what I'm saying, and two, because they never heard me talk. So I was like, panic disorder,
Yeah.
agoraphobia, and I'm looking around, and everyone is, it's like pin drop silent in there, and I'm like, are they thinking I'm nuts? Are they
Yeah.
connecting to this? Like, I
You're
don't know
afraid.
what. Yeah, like I don't, like my mind is just thinking about what everyone's thinking. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna play my song, right? I played my few songs, and then when I got off the stage and I was done, people were walking up to me and they were like, oh, I have this, like I have schizophrenia, I have bipolar too, I have this and this, and that was so brave of you. And even that same night, some people got up and were like, I was just planning to do whatever I was doing too, but after I just heard Mark say that, I want to talk about my story. I
Wow.
lost my parents, or I had this thing happen to me, or I had that. So then it became like a thing that I did every time, where I
Wow.
would get up there. If it wasn't to talk about my whole story, it was to talk about my experience that day. Hey, I
Mm.
woke up with a deep depression today and I was thinking about not coming and
Mm.
up until the last minute. And then I was like, maybe I should go, whatever. And, people really connected with that. And
Yeah.
I'm talking people who are white, Asian, Black, Indian, Hispanic, whatever they were, whatever they identified as,
Mm.
anything, every type of person had like these parallels where I could be walking down the street, me and you could pass each other on the street.
Mhm.
It's New York. I could
Right.
just we could just walk past each other like
Yeah, we're cool. And then it's different.
we
It's
could just
different here.
totally, yeah, like we could just walk. It's not like the South or something where everyone's like, "Hey, good morning, how are
Yeah.
you doing?" Whatever. Like it's like a lot
Yeah,
of
here
us
it's like
just,
stranger danger.
but it's like there's a whole story there. I wouldn't know how many different things I relate to you on, how many different ways that we connect.
Right.
And I'm appreciative, like just like you said, social media, mental health platforms, because we sometimes share even more there than what we share with the people around us in our lives.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier because I'm like, this person doesn't know me.
Right.
So I can share about this thing that's going on or this trauma that I'm experiencing but you never know. Because I've also had friends and family who have surprised me and been like, oh, I watched your YouTube page.
Right.
Oh, I
And you're like,
saw
"You
when
see
you.
my stuff? You watch what I do?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, this went much longer than planned, but don't worry about it. It just means I'm gonna have to drive out there for my race, but I was aware when the time went past. I think this conversation was very important and it will be impactful for the people watching.
I hope
And
so. I hope so.
and I really want to thank you for sharing because it's not lost on me. I don't know how much you share this stuff in your day to day. But for me, I'm a peer counselor. So I literally share about my journey
Mm.
5 days a week, 40 hours a week. Like it's commonplace for me. But it's not. It doesn't mean that it's easy. Like you don't know who's watching it. You don't know what each person who watches is gonna think or feel
Right.
about it. So it's a brave thing to do. And something you said at the very beginning of this conversation was that we don't have these conversations a lot of time, especially about grief.
Right.
I remember when I lost my dad's father, my grandfather, like many different people that my folks and aunts and uncles and people, family in my life lost. And we just kind of go to the service,
Mm.
and then I didn't know how they dealt with it. I have no idea about
Yeah.
their grief process. So I
Yeah.
think these open conversations is just like, this is my experience, this is what I've dealt with, and this is where I am now. I think it's going to be, I think more of them need to happen, and it's going to benefit the world in a big way.
Absolutely. Just to show all the steps, like the reflection, where you are and how far you've grown since where are you at now. I love that you were talking about that earlier about like today I'm at a 4 or whatever. Like you were kind of saying like where am I mentally? I watched a video on Instagram the other day, just quick, about marriage. And it came up on my feed. I think it was on the mental health page, and it came up on like the For You page, And she was talking about marriage, and she was older, and I was like, okay, I clicked on it, and she was talking about how her and her husband walk in the door at night, and they tell each other where they are, like in terms of headspace, I think, or maybe stress level,
Wow.
something like that, stress level or something. And it was like, if she says like I'm below a 5, then I need to like go work on myself. Or if he says like I'm at a 10, uh don't worry about it, and you're at a 4, you go take a nap, like I'll cook dinner, or you just go for a walk and come back. It holds you accountable, I think, for your emotions if you are open and honest about where you're at mentally, not just for you but for whoever you're living with. I just thought that was so great. So I'm like, we should be like that with the hard stuff. We should be like that with grief and with the things that we're struggling with. We shouldn't just be sharing the good stuff. We should be comfortable enough to say, "Hey, I'm at a 3 today." I just thought that was great. So having more of
That
those
that
conversations.
is that is amazing.
Yeah.
You know why that's okay. I used to work at this place. You know the place, I've told you about it. It was a
Yeah.
counseling center. And I remember when I started leading groups, I would start the group. I used to have an article with me, and I would be like, I'm going to go through the article, I prepare what I was going to say, and I start reading the article, and then somebody might throw this like off the wall comment directed at me. And I'm like, what did I do to this person that made them so angry? And
Right.
then, so then I developed my own system of just what you just described,
Mm.
where I would start the group. Instead of starting with the article, I would go around the room and I would say, how's everybody doing on a scale of 1 to 10?
That's awesome.
And so if they gave me like a 7, 8, 9, or 10, I would be like, I'm glad to hear that. 5 or 6, I'd be like, sorry you're experiencing that. I hope that by the end of the group, I can get you up to like a 10. And if they said anything 4 and below, I would be like, is there anything that you would like to share? Is there anything you want to talk about? And the
Okay.
thing is, sometimes they would say, this is going on with my family, or this is going on with me, or I'm not feeling good, or whatever. But even if they didn't, I felt like the fact that I asked
Mm.
diffused them from potentially like throwing the group off the rails,
Right.
because it made me realize that everyone who came in there had their own situations going on in their life. They
Mm.
could be having a terrible day. They could be having the best day ever. They could be having anything in between. And I'm just the vessel. Like, I'm just the person sitting up there, and I could be like, "Hey, this is the way that you get to happiness." And they're like, "Screw this guy talking about happiness, because like I'm so unhappy right now, and he's
Yeah.
giving me 1, 2, 3 ABC steps to happiness."
Yeah.
And then they say something that I might feel is personal that is really not personal.
Mm.
So, and that solved the problem for the most part. I almost never experienced anyone just going out of left field and just saying crazy things about me anymore. Um, so I was just thinking as you were saying that, imagine, like you asked me how I'm doing before I turned this camera on.
Mhm.
Imagine if each interaction, I know that one was specifically for like a married couple, but each interaction, you're like, how are you feeling today?
Right.
1 to 10. And you were genuinely prepared to deal with that answer. Like if the person said 1, all right, so because you're at a 1, I know that I can't ask you to do me this favor or overextend yourself because you're already feeling at this low point.
Right.
And I'm feeling at an 8 today. So I can carry a little bit more than you can. I think
Exactly.
that would be so beneficial for people to do.
Yeah.
What what a
Definitely.
what an interesting share.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Thank you for having me on today. I know you have to get to your race, but I wish you lots of luck. It's a beautiful day. And hopefully you're at a 10 now. Hopefully you're at a 10 because I feel like after this conversation I am. So,
this conversation helped me get a lot out. So I feel
yeah.
like I am at a 10 right now. How I'm gonna feel at the race starting line might be different, but it varies throughout the day. It's a good day so far. So thank you once again.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell everybody where to follow you?
Sure. Yeah. So, I have a blog. It's on wordpress.com. But you can also go to Instagram, which is at Coffee with Carly. And the link is in my bio if you want to read that blog. Otherwise, I post on Instagram pretty often now. I would say sometimes I go through phases. I don't post all the time. But it's a public account and it's about mental health awareness and my journey since probably about 2018 of just kind of going through as an undiagnosed person. So if that interests you, feel free to follow me. And like I said, me and Mark, we're pretty open on our platform. So message us if you have any questions, and I'm happy to help.
Thanks once again, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks so much.